So in the last video, I showed you how to create a health bar for your game. And in this video, we're going to talk about how to create a stamina bar. Now, I'll do two things in this video. First, I'll actually show you how to create the actual stamina bar. So it actually has stamina, it goes up and down. And then afterwards, I'm going to show you how to actually make the stamina bar affect your player. So you actually have him sprinting. And once you run out of stamina, then of course, he's not going to be sprinting anymore. So we're actually going to have it incorporated into our game. So it actually has an effect on our game. So essentially, if you want to, you can watch the first half of this video where we actually learn how to create the stamina bar. And if that's all you need, then you can just stop there. But if you also want to learn how to incorporate it into your games, then you can, of course, watch the second part too. Now, I do have a confession to make before we get into this video, which is that we are actually going to be building the stamina bar directly off of the health bar that we built in the last two videos. So if you haven't watched the last two videos and you don't have the same thing in front of you as I do have in front of me here, then I do recommend that you watch the health system as well as the health bar, where we actually built the UI for the health bar, which we do in the last two videos. My apologies that I'm actually sending you back to watch two videos before we can get started on this one, but if I didn't do that, then I would just have to teach you the exact same thing as I do in those two videos, which are pretty well done. Clapping myself on the shoulder here, praising myself. I would just have to teach those same things in this video as well. So instead of duplicating the same teachings, I'm just gonna send you back to watch those two, and then we're gonna tweak it inside this video here. So do that and then return to this video here. So now that you're back again, let's actually go ahead and do the tweaks in order to create a stamina bar. Now you have two choices here. Either you can just go ahead and keep the health bar and then have a stamina bar below it, or you can just go ahead and completely just say, you know what, I don't want a health bar, I'm just going to convert it into a stamina bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it to make sure I have a health bar and a stamina bar. So I'm just going to go ahead and take my health bar that is inside my canvas, and I'm going to duplicate it, Control D to do that, or Command D if you're on Mac. And then I'm just going to go ahead and rename it so it says stamina bar. So we're just going to say stamina bar. Then I'm going to open it up and make sure that we also rename the elements inside of it. So instead of HB fill, which stands for health bar fill, I'm going to say SB fill for stamina bar. Just going to go ahead and copy that. Go inside the overlay, paste that in. So we have a stamina bar overlay. And then instead of a health bar heart, I'm actually going to say stamina bar underscore energy, because that is going to be the actual icon that we have here for the stamina. Now, I do actually have a stamina or a energy icon that I just created inside Photoshop. If you want to have an energy icon, you can just go ahead and create one really quickly inside Photoshop or download one off the internet, just a small icon you can paste in. I just went ahead and created a small stamina bar icon, so I'm just going to copy it in so it looks like this. And with that, I'm just going to go into my stamina bar energy, and I'm just going to say I want to replace it with my stamina bar energy icon, like so. And with that, we can actually go ahead and move my stamina bar down a little bit. So we just, want to make sure it's not sitting right on top of the health bar. So we can just say it's going to be just around 360 on the y-axis, like so. Now, what I do also want to do here is I want to make sure the filling isn't red. So I actually want to change it to yellow. So what I can do is I can open up my filling, go into the color, and just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to pick this color in here. So now we have a yellow color for the stamina bar. So with that done, we actually now have the in-game element set up for, actually messing around and creating a stamina bar. I will do one more thing though before we continue, which is to go inside my player. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I add a little bit more of a linear drag to him, because I kind of felt that he was floating around a little bit too much. So instead of 5, I'm just going to go ahead and say 10. Just to make sure that there's a little bit more air resistance when he's running around, so he's not sliding on ice. So with this, we can actually get started on creating the actual code in order to get our stamina bar working. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go inside my scripts. And inside my scripts, I'm going to go ahead and create not a unit health, but I'm actually going to create a unit stamina, because we will be creating a class that has all the different stamina information, just like we did with the health for the player. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a C# script, and I'm just going to call it UnitStamina. And I'm just going to open it up inside my editor. Now, just a small trick here, if you want to make sure that you can do things without having to rewrite everything again, is actually go into Unity and open up your unit health script that we created in the last episode, actually 2 episodes ago. And just go ahead and take that and paste it over to the side here. You can see once you drag it, you get this little icon in the middle of the screen, so I can drop it. So now we can actually see the unit health on the right side, and we now have the stamina on the left side. So what I can simply do is I can go inside my public class. Don't copy the class, by the way, because if you copy the class name as well, then it's going to mess up inside your script. So just go ahead and copy everything inside the class, copy it, and paste it inside your new class over here on the left side. So we do want to delete MonoBehaviour because this is just going to be a regular class. It's not going to be based on MonoBehaviour. So with that, I can actually just close down my unit health because we don't need to see it anymore. We copy pasted what we needed. And what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll start changing the fields because they don't need to look like this, because this is for the health and not the stamina. So now I'm just basically going to go in and I'm going to change the fields to match up with the stamina bar that I want to build. Of course, you can make up a lot of parameters that you might have for your stamina bar, but I just have 4 that I want to include in order to get this working. So the first one I want to do is I want to say current stamina, and I also want to have a current max stamina, so we can see what the current stamina is and what the potential max stamina is. You know, if it's all the way full, what should it be at? We do also want to include a stamina regeneration speed because I do want my stamina to regenerate when I'm not actually sprinting. So I'm going to go down and I'm actually going to create a float. And I'm going to call this one underscore stamina regen speed. And I do want to take these integers up here and I actually want to change them to a float. So there is the possibility to not have whole numbers, but actually to have decimal points. So you want to have that at some point inside your game, just to make it a little bit more smooth when it like goes up and down if you want to do that. The last thing I want to include in here is to check if the stamina regeneration is paused, because there might be some cases inside your game where you want to pause the stamina regeneration. And if that happens, then of course, you know, let's say your player gets a debuff or something, or something is happening that doesn't allow for his stamina to regenerate, then you can actually go ahead and do that using this one field here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a Boolean, and I'm going to call this one pause stamina regen. So underscore pause stamina regen. And I'm just going to set this one equal to false, just to have a starting point. Now, the next thing we're going to be doing is we're actually going to change the properties down here, and we also need to include the properties for the last 2 that I added in. So the first one here, which is a public integer health, actually needs to be changed to a public float. And it's not going to be health, but stamina. Again, I did explain what these do in the last 2 episodes ago in the first video of this series. So just to make sure that if you have any questions, you can go back and you can actually watch that. I'm also going to go ahead and change the actual names in here. So we're going to return current stamina. I'm also going to change this one down here to max stamina. And then of course, we're going to copy paste just like we did in the other one. And then we just simply copy paste these 2 properties because we have 2 more we want to create. I'm just going to copy them below or paste them below. And then I'm going to change the names down here so we don't have stamina, but we instead have something called stamina regen speed. Like so. And then I'm going to change the actual data inside that one as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy our fields. I'm going to go down and I'm going to paste it in here. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the last one. This one is going to be called pause stamina regen. Regen, like so. And then of course I'm going to paste in the actual names that we have up here. So I'm going to paste it in and paste it in. Now we do want to make sure as well that we're changing the integer into a float. I didn't do that and it's actually casting a error because I didn't do it. So we want to make sure that we actually do that to get rid of those error messages there. So with the properties created, which is just kind of something we need to do to get started. The last one down here, by the way, should actually be a Boolean because we're of course creating a Boolean for the last field. What we can now do is we can actually change the constructor to match with our stamina bar. So here we have to make a decision. How much of these, like the fields that we have inside this class here, do we actually want to set as we create this object based on the class the first time? Now, in this case here, because I don't know what project you're sitting with, you could be sitting with any kind of project where maybe each enemy unit or something might have to have a different set of parameters. So I'm just going to make sure that all the fields can be set once we actually create the object based on this class the first time, just to make sure that it's foolproof for anyone sitting there watching this video here. So what I'll do is I'll actually say UnitStamina. And just again, for anyone wondering, the constructor is whenever you create a method that has the same name as the actual class, because then this one gets run when you actually create an object based off this class here. So you can actually set the field data as you create the object. So basically, instead of a integer health, I'm going to say I want to create a float stamina. Then I also want to create a float max stamina. And I do also want to create a float stamina regen speed. And then of course, we do also need to include the Boolean pause stamina regen. There we go. And then we of course also need to make sure that the data is set correctly inside the actual constructor, so we actually set the right data. So the first one is going to be equal to stamina. Actually, let's just go ahead and copy paste this one down a couple of times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we make sure we have 4 in here. The second one is going to be max stamina. The third one is going to be stamina regen speed. And then pause stamina regen. And then we of course need to change the first ones here, which is going to be what we have up here. So current stamina is going to be the first one. Actually, let's just go and copy paste all of these so we can just copy paste them very easily. So I'm just going to go down, paste them in. So we can copy current stamina, current max stamina, stamina regen speed, and pause stamina regen. And then we just delete them again. There we go. Next, we actually want to ask ourselves, what kind of methods do we want to be able to run with this stamina here? You know, what do we want to do with the stamina? And you can add any kind of methods that you want to do in your project. I'm just going to go ahead and show you a couple of methods that I think is important for this particular tutorial here to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the first one we have here, or the second one. So we just have one of them. And I'm just going to make a couple of changes to it. The first one is going to be a public void, and then I'm going to change this one to use stamina, because I want to make sure that we have a method for actually using stamina, so we can decrease the stamina that we have inside our character. And then of course, inside the parameters, we want to include how much stamina do we actually want to use. So I'm going to say this is a float, and we're just going to call this one stamina amount. And then basically inside the actual method, we just want to make sure that if we have more than 0 stamina, then I want to be able to decrease the stamina, because we don't want to, if we reach 0, continue to go below 0, because that wouldn't make sense. Otherwise, we're going to go into the negatives. So this statement here, the if statement, actually needs to stay, but we want to change the actual field. So instead of current health, it's going to be current stamina. And then we just simply want to go in and say that we want to take the current stamina, and we want to subtract a certain amount from it, which is going to be the stamina amount. Now, in this case here, you know, we do want to just copy paste it down, but I will be doing this inside an update statement later on, because we do need to continuously decrease the stamina as we're holding down shift. So we need to continuously do that every single frame, you know, as much as possible. So we do need to make sure we add in time.delta time in order for it to not, you know, be based on your frame rate, but instead based on seconds. So what I can do is I can say I want to multiply this with time dot delta time. And just like that, would then have it not go out of control once we actually start decreasing the stamina. So with this method here, I can actually create a second one, because that was the first method. Now the second one is going to be where we just automatically regenerate stamina over time when we're not touching anything, because we're not sprinting. I want to regenerate my stamina. So what I can do here is I can call this one regen stamina. And then I just want to make sure that I delete whatever parameters inside my parentheses, because we don't actually need to pass anything in. This is going to be a passive type method that just runs by itself. And inside of here, I want to make sure that I check if the current stamina is right now lesser than the max stamina that we have. So we're going to say current max stamina. And I do also want to make sure that currently we haven't set our pause stamina regen to true, because if it is true, then we don't want to be regenerating stamina because we have paused it. So I want to check if it's equal to false, because if it's false, then it's not active. And then inside the actual if statement, we just want to make sure that instead of subtracting, we're actually adding, and we want to be adding based on the stamina regen speed. And then of course, time.delta time, because this is actually going to be run inside a update method later on. So we want to make sure, again, it doesn't go out of control. And this is everything that we actually need to have inside our unit stamina. With that, we can jump on to actually changing the UI, because remember, the unit stamina is just going to be changing the actual data inside the game, but we also want to make sure that the data gets shown inside the UI. So we do want to make sure we have a separate script that just simply controls the UI element to make sure it actually has the bar going up and down based on these numbers here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back inside my Unity, and I'm just going to go and create a new script that is going to not be called health bar, but instead is going to be called Staminabar. And then I'm just going to open up inside my editor. Now we're going to do the exact same thing as we did with the last script. We're just going to go back into Unity and we're going to open up the health bar script. And I'm just going to copy everything I have inside the actual class. Remember, we don't want to copy the class name because then we're going to get an error message. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste it inside my stamina bar. So we're just going to go in here and paste it in. And then we can actually close down the health bar because we don't need it anymore. Now, the first thing we're going to be doing in here is we're actually going to make sure that we can do anything with UI inside the script. So we need to go on top of here and we need to add a new namespace. So we're going to say using Unity engine dot UI. And with that, you can now see that all the error messages just kind of disappear. So all we now need to do is just change a couple of things in here. So instead of health slider, we're just going to call it stamina slider. We're going to copy paste that name down here. So we actually have the stamina slider pasted in. Then I do also want to change the name of the methods down here. So instead of set max health, it is going to be set max stamina. And then I also want to make sure I change that inside the actual parameters. So it's going to say max stamina. Then I also want to do the same thing down here. So we're just going to copy paste. And we want to change the second method down here as well. So instead of set health, it's going to set stamina. Let's actually make sure we spell that correctly. Stamina. Then I'm going to change the parameter, which is going to be stamina. And then I'm just going to paste it in below. And like this, we now have everything changed that we now need to have changed inside the Staminabar script. So going back inside Unity, we of course now need to replace a couple of things because we still have the health script attached to my stamina bar over here. So we just want to make sure we go inside our stamina bar fill and then scroll down to the bottom. And as you can see, we actually have a health bar script down here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete or remove component from this particular game object. And I'm just going to drag in my stamina bar. So we have it inside here like so. So with that, we now have everything that we need in order to actually get started on having the stamina bar working inside our game. Now, in the first video where I showed you how to actually create a health bar and that I inserted inside my game manager. So we actually had a overall game manager class controlling the actual health bar. We're going to do the same thing for the stamina bar because this is a global stamina bar for my players. So this is one that just needs to be active at all time. So I'm just going to make sure that I insert it inside the same place as the health bar, which is inside my game manager. So we're just going to go ahead and open up our game manager, which is right here. It is the little wheel icon that you have inside your scripts there. So inside the game manager, I just want to make sure that we copy paste our public unit health. I'm going to paste it below. And then I'm just going to change it to unit stamina. And then I'm going to change the name to player stamina. And then I want to instantiate not the unit health, but I want to instantiate the unit stamina, which is the script that we just created at the very beginning, which had all this information, you know, with the fields and the properties and all that. That's what we're instantiating right now. Of course, we do need to make sure we're changing the parameters in here because they're not correct at the moment. We do actually have 4. So the first 2 is going to be the current stamina, the max stamina, which is okay for now, but we do need to make sure that we create these as floats because they are float data types. And then we also want to make sure we add a regeneration speed. In this case here, I'm just going to go ahead and set it to 30. And how do I know that? Because I tested it out before I made this video. I do have notes on the side that says that the perfect number that I found was 30. So we're going to go ahead and set this one to 30F. Then we're also going to make sure to set this one to false in the 4th parameter. So we tell it that it's not going to be paused when it comes to like regenerating the stamina. So with this, we now have an actual stamina bar instantiated inside the background that is actually going to have the code working. But we do want to make sure that the UI is actually illustrating what the stamina bar code actually says, because we do need to take the code and showed visually inside the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my player behavior scripts, because if you saw the last episode where we actually talked about creating the actual bar for the health, I actually went into my player behavior script and I simply went in and said, okay, so we have a health bar from the player that I'm going to serialize field, so I can just drag it in, and then I can actually manipulate the health bar from inside my player behavior script, which meant that I could actually go down inside my update method and say, when I hold down a certain key, then do something specific like take damage or heal my player by using the space and the left shift key. And then I had two methods that just simply took care of, first of all, updating the code inside the instantiated class. So we actually had the code updating, but also updating the UI. So these methods down here simply takes care of doing those two things, because, you know, both need to be updated. So both the code and the UI says the right thing, right? So all we need to do now is to go at the top here and simply copy and paste down the health bar line of code. And instead we're going to instantiate, or not instantiate, but we're going to grab the stamina bar. Then I'm going to make sure I rename this one to _Staminabar. But now, before we change anything inside the update method down here, let's actually go and create the two methods that we need in order to update the stamina bar. So I'm just going to go down 2 lines and I'm going to just copy paste the first method we have up here, because why do we have to rewrite things when we just copy paste? And I'm just going to go ahead and call this method player use stamina. Then I'm going to tell it how much stamina I want to use. So I'm going to say this is a float parameter, which is going to be called stamina amount. And then inside of here, I'm simply going to call upon 2 different things. First of all, the actual instantiated class that we have inside our game manager to actually change the code of our stamina bar. And then we're also going to change the actual UI element inside our game, so it actually shows the stamina inside the UI. So inside the first line here, instead of saying we want to access the game manager player health, we want to access the game manager player stamina. And then I want to make sure we access the proper method inside our actual class. So if we were to go ahead and go inside our UnitStamina, you can see at the bottom here, we have a method called UseStamina. So we're going to go ahead and reference to that one. So I'm just going to copy paste it and reference to that one instead. And then of course we want to paste in stamina amount. So now we're actually using the method from inside our class. So all we need to do now is actually update the UI. So instead of health bar, I actually want to make sure that we grab the stamina bar. And then I want to make sure I use the proper method inside my stamina bar. So going inside the stamina bar, you can see that right now we can actually set stamina, because I set that as a method. So just going to copy that. And I just noticed that we still have these set to integers. So let's actually go and make sure we change these to floats, because like I said, being able to put it a little bit more accurately with float numbers is just something that can make things a little bit smoother if you want to. So make sure that you do that and save. But just go ahead and grab the name set stamina, go back inside your player behavior and say that we want to access the set stamina. And then of course we want to change exactly what we're updating it to. And that is not going to be the health bar, but instead going to be the player stamina. And then we want to access the stamina, like the current stamina of the player right now. So now it's actually going to update if we call upon this method here. The second method is going to be a stamina regeneration method. So we're just going to go ahead and copy paste the method that we have here. And instead I'm going to call this one player regen stamina. And we're also going to make sure that we just delete anything we have inside the parameters here, because we don't actually need to have that. And now again, we just simply need to update the actual methods in here. So instead of use stamina, we actually need to access something else, which is going to be, so if we go back inside our stamina class, you can actually go and see we have one called regen stamina that is going to regenerate our stamina passively over time. So I'm just going to go and grab that one, go back inside my player behavior and say I want to reference to that one instead. And we're just going to go and delete the parameters since we don't need to have one. And with this line of code, we're now actually regenerating the stamina slowly over time, which is something that is happening inside the code. So we need to make sure that we're double checking that the UI is also going to be updating this passively inside the UI so the player can actually see the stamina is actually regenerating. And it actually so happens that right now we don't need to change anything because we're just simply updating the UI using this method here. So everything is fine. fine. So now all we need to do is we need to go inside our update and actually make sure that when we're clicking the right buttons, then proper things are happening. Now, I do want to say something here, which is that in the last episode with the health bar, I decided that we're actually going to heal our player using the left shift key, and that's usually the sprint button inside games. Whoops. So let's actually make sure we change this one. So instead of the left shift key, let's just change it to something like Q. Just, you know, the Q letter on your keyboard. So when you're actually healing, you can do so using Q. I'm also going to go ahead and delete these debugs in here because we don't need to see the health bar inside our game, inside Unity. So we're just going to go and delete those. And then we're just simply going to copy paste this if statement at the top, go down a couple of lines and paste it in. You could also create a note here just to make sure you separate. So this could say health input. And then we can also go ahead and say that this bottom one here is going to be the stamina input, just so you don't confuse yourself. What we want to do here is we want to make sure that we don't do get key down, but we actually want to get key, because get key down is only going to register the first time just as you click down on the shift key, but we want to continue to register the key as it's being held down. So we do that using get key. Then we want to check for not the key code space, but the key code left shift, which is down here. And now what I simply want to do is I want to not run the player take damage, but I want to go down here and say I want to use stamina. So we're just going to say player use stamina. It's going to get run. And we want to tell it how much stamina do we actually want to use. So now we can actually insert a number, just any kind of random number that we want to use. I have found out that 60 is a pretty good number for this example here. So I'm just going to write 60. And with this, we can now actually use stamina. But we also want to make sure that we're generating stamina when we're not holding down the shift key. So I'm going to say that we also have a else statement. And inside this else statement, we're just going to say that we want to run the regeneration method that we have down here. So player regen stamina. And with that, let's actually go and test things out. We do actually need to do one thing, which is we do need to go into our player, which is down here. And at the bottom, you can actually see that we didn't actually tell it what the stamina bar is. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my stamina bar, which is going to be the SB_fill, paste that in there, make sure we save, and now we can actually test things out. So if I'm inside the game, you can see that if I hold down shift, then we're actually using stamina. And when I'm not holding down shift, it's regenerating again. So I'm running, and then I'm regenerating by not holding down shift again. So it is working, and it's not going to go below 0 if I keep holding it down. As soon as I let go, it's going to start regenerating again because it didn't go below, or at least way below 0. It might be like minus 0.1 or something, you know, because that's how code works. But essentially, it's not going to go below that, and we can just go ahead and regenerate it again. So with that, how do we actually incorporate it into our player? So essentially at this point, if you just want to know how to do the stamina bar, this is it. You don't need to watch any more of this tutorial. But if you want to learn how to incorporate it into your player, so it's actually sprinting and not sprinting, then I'll show you how to do that now. So with that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my player controller. Now, if you don't know, player controller and player behavior are two different things. Essentially, player controller just takes care of the actual controls of your character, like the speed he's running, what happens when you press left and right, you know, should he move around, like just the general movement stuff. Whereas player behavior is more about him interacting or taking damage or using stamina, you know, more like behavior stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my player controller, and I do actually want to make sure that my speed is right now set to a public float speed. The reason for this is just that I need to go in and actually change the speed at some point. So when I'm holding down shift, I want to make sure this number is actually getting bigger. So that's the only thing we need to do in here. So now we just go back into player behavior, and we can actually start doing things in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and go inside my start method. Actually, no, we're going to do something at the very top here first. We actually want to make sure we grab the player controller, and then we're going to do something inside the start method. So inside here, I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste. And I do want to make sure that this one is not stamina bar, but player controller. Now, there's a couple of ways you could do this, of course. You could go ahead and just grab the player controller inside the start method since it's attached to the same game object, but I'm just going to go ahead and serialize field it and just drag and drop it in there. You can do either way. It's really up to you how you want to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and change the name here. So we have player controller. And then I'm going to create two fields, which is simply going to be what the original speed is and what the sprint speed is going to be. So what I can do here is I can go ahead and say I want to create a float and just call this something like player original speed. You can probably make up something that's a lot shorter than original speed, but it just kind of makes more sense for my viewers if I write that out. And then we're going to go ahead and add a second one, which is going to be a float player sprint speed. And now what I'll do is I'm going to go inside my start method here, and I'm going to say that the player original speed is actually going to be equal to the player controller dot underscore speed. Because we set it to public, we can now access it. If you don't have it set to public, it's not going to suggest it for you because you're not allowed to actually access it. So make sure you double check for that. And then I'm just simply going to copy paste it down, and I'm just going to change it so that player sprint speed is going to be set to something else. What I'll do here is I'll actually go ahead and set it to the player controller underscore speed multiplied by 2. So again, you can do whatever you want here. You can multiply it by 1.5, or if you want to have a like a sneak feature, then you can just multiply it by 0.5 or something. But essentially, I'm just going to multiply it by 2 because I figured that's a good number for my game here. With this, we can now go back inside our update where we have the stamina input. And now we just need to tweak a few things here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to check if my stamina is below 0. Because if it is below 0, then of course we don't want to keep running because we're not allowed to sprint anymore once we actually hit 0. That's the whole point about having a stamina bar. So I'm going to go down here and say I have a if statement. And inside the condition, I'm just simply going to check if the instantiated class currently has the stamina set to less than 0. So what I'll do is I can actually just go down and just copy paste. So right now the game manager dot game manager player stamina, and then not the use stamina, but we're actually going to go and access the current stamina. So instead of accessing a method, we're going to access one of the properties in there. So inside the if statement, I'm just going to paste that in, delete the semicolon at the end. And instead of the method here, like I said, we're just going to access the stamina, which is just going to give us the current stamina inside our current player here. I'm going to say that I only want to run this if statement if it's greater than 0. So if we have stamina to use, and with that, we do actually need to take the if statement and put it inside our get key shift check that we have down here. I forgot about that. So I'm going to paste it in, and I'm just simply going to take my player use stamina, and I'm going to paste it inside this if statement. So basically what we're doing inside these two if statements here is we're checking if the player is actually holding down shifts in order to use stamina. And if he's doing so, then we want to actually decrease the stamina that is being used. But we also need to make sure that the speed of the player is actually affected by this. So what I can do is I can go below my player use stamina. And we can actually do an optimization move here, which is to check if we already have the speed set to a certain amount inside the player's speed. Because if it is set to sprint, then we don't want to keep resetting it to sprint every single frame, which is just going to hog up unnecessary resources. So if we currently have our speed inside our player controller set to sprint, then we don't want to keep re-updating it. So what I'll do is I'll include this if statement here, and then I'll simply go inside the if statement and say if my current player controller, which is the field that we set at the top there, dot underscore speed is currently not equal to our sprint speed, which we actually set up here. Spring speed, I misspelled that. Sprint speed. There we go. So we have it set up correctly. If it's not equal to the sprint speed, then we do actually want to update it and set the speed equal to what the sprint speed is supposed to be. So we can actually just copy paste this line of code, paste it in, and say we want to set it equal to sprint speed. And then of course we want to perform a else statement that is going to be part of the one where we check for the stamina being greater than 0. Because if our stamina is actually 0 or lesser than 0, then I want to set my player speed equal to the original speed. So we don't have him sprinting even though we run out of stamina. That's essentially what we're doing here. And inside the last else statement at the bottom where we actually let go of the shift key and we want to regenerate stamina, I do also want to make sure we change the speed to the original speed so we're not sprinting when we let go of the shift key. So going down here, we're just simply going to copy paste this if statement because again, we don't want to run duplicate code if the original speed is set to the original speed. So in here, I'm just going to check if the speed is not equal to not the player sprint speed, but the player original speed. And if it's not equal to the original speed, I'm just gonna go and make sure that it is set to the original speed. So with this, we now have everything that we need in order to get this working. So going back inside our game, I can actually go ahead and replay it. Let's actually make sure we stop it here. There we go. Now we play it again. Oh, we do actually need to do one thing. Now, because I decided to create a serialized field instead of just grabbing the player controller script, I actually need to go inside my player here, go to the bottom, and actually drag in my player controller. So we actually have this working properly. So with that, let's actually go and play it again and make sure that we check things out. As you can see right now, we have a slow moving player. Do make sure that if you want to have smooth frames inside your game, that you're deselecting everything inside the inspector. Otherwise, it can actually be looking a little bit stuttering. So with this, if I hold down shift, you can see I'm sprinting fast and my speed up here is actually falling down. And once I actually reach 0, it's not going to sprint anymore. So if I let go, I regenerate a little bit, hold down shift, I'm moving fast, and we're slow again because we ran out of speed. So now it's actually working like intended. So we can just kind of like do, you know, sprinting inside our game in a way that actually works. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this little video. It's probably pretty long, but I hope you got it working. So with that, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.